anyone who's stopped, they have rights. They are allowed within the law to assert those rights, to protect their own rights, and they should. When an officer walks up to your car, you should know what your rights are, and you should make sure you know where you stand by asking if you're free to go, by asking why you were stopped. I'm here behind Sterling's car to talk to you about how to properly deal with a police officer during a traffic stop. The first thing you should notice is that Sterling has pulled all the way over to the right-hand side next to the curb and stopped the car. He's turned the car off to let the officer know that this individual is not going to try to drive away during the stop. As we go forward, you'll also notice that Sterling has an overnight bag in the back seat. It's zipped up and closed. That's very important. Do not keep personal items out in the open. If an officer sees something that he thinks is suspicious, it could give him grounds to detain you for a longer period of time and possibly even confiscate your automobile. So always keep any bags zipped up and any personal items inside those bags. As we go forward, you'll notice that Sterling has had the foresight to roll his window down and be prepared for the officer. He's also keeping his hands on the steering wheel in view so the officer knows that he doesn't have any reason to be suspicious or fearful of something Sterling may reach for. This is also important because if you're reaching around the vehicle and opening things, you're giving the officer an opportunity to ask to look into areas that you have reached into. By keeping your hands on the wheel, you alleviate the officer's concerns and don't give him an opportunity to look further into your vehicle. Next, you'll see that Sterling has his seatbelt properly fastened. That can be a separate infraction in most states and would lead to another ticket. The next thing that I would like to talk to you about is the questions and answers that may come up during this stop. When answering a police officer's questions, always be courteous, polite, and direct. The first question you may be asked will be a general question about your stop. For instance, do you know why I've stopped you, sir?
No, sir. Have I done something wrong?
Sterling has made an outstanding response. He has not admitted or denied anything. He's not given the officer probable cause to believe that he's done anything wrong. The next question will probably be a more specific request for some type of admission. Sir, don't you realize you ran that stop sign?
Officer, if I did anything wrong, can I please just have my ticket, please?
Again, another good response. Sterling has let the officer know that he does not want to voluntarily stay at this scene. He wants to be processed for his ticket if he did anything wrong, but again, he has not admitted to doing anything wrong. The officer may proceed with an even more specific request for an incriminating statement, like this. Sir, I think I smell alcohol. Have you been drinking?
Officer, if this is going to be more than a ticket, may I call somebody?
Again, Sterling is giving good responses. He's keeping his hands in view, he's not being confrontational, and he's answering exactly what he's been asked. He's told the officer that he wants his ticket, and he's forced the officer to decide if he has enough probable cause to turn this into a detention and investigation, or if all he has is enough to write a ticket and let this motorist be on his way. The next thing I'd like to talk to you about is what to do if you're asked to step out of your vehicle. Sir, would you step out of your vehicle and come to the rear, please?
Yes, sir.
Once again, Sterling has responded very well. First, he did exactly what the officer asked. He did not resist. He did not question the officer's authority. If Sterling had refused to get out of the car or had questioned the officer's authority, he might have been subject to arrest for resisting law enforcement or refusal to obey an order. That would have given the officer an opportunity to search the car with no additional reason. By coming to the back of the car and not saying anything, Sterling did not make any admissions or any denials. He's done exactly what he should do, and at the same time respected the officer's authority and let him run the situation the way he sees fit. Sterling's now in a situation where he's been asked to get out of his vehicle, but he's not been placed under arrest. That's probably because the officer realizes he doesn't have very much to work with. What will probably happen next is the officer will attempt to ask questions and get Sterling to incriminate himself, or he might request permission to search the vehicle or its contents. It's important to understand, If this is your car and you know there's nothing incriminating in it, it may be in your best interest to consent to such a search and allow the officer to look through it and get you on your way quickly. However, if you're in a borrowed or rented car and you don't know what's in the car, you should protect yourself and your rights. For instance, sir, do you mind if I look through your car?
I'm sorry, it's not my car. I can't give you permission.
Sterling has done something very important. When the police officer saw him in this vehicle, he was justified in thinking that Sterling had permission to consent to a search. Now the officer knows that Sterling cannot consent to a search. But Sterling hasn't done anything to hide any incriminating evidence. He doesn't do anything evasive by simply informing the officer that he does not have authority to give such consent. Despite that, the officer may attempt to search the contents of the car. For instance, well, I noticed there's a gym bag in the back seat. Do you mind if I look through that bag?
It's not my gym bag either. But am I free to go?
Now Sterling's done something else that's very important. He has asked the officer if he's free to go. That is a critical tipping point. If a person is free to go, they are by definition not under arrest. If the officer decides to keep Sterling here at that point, he is by definition under arrest, even if the officer doesn't tell him he's under arrest. If you're in this situation, you must ask for an attorney if the questions continue. Hey sir, I think you're trying to hide something from me. What's going on here? What's in that car?
If you're gonna continue questioning me, I want an attorney.
Sterling has done the most important thing that he can do at this point. He has specifically asked for an attorney. Once you ask for an attorney, all questioning must stop until an attorney is present, or the officer has to decide that he doesn't have enough to keep you there and let you go. Sterling's helped us today go through everything from the actual stop of his vehicle to a potential arrest. But let me assure you, he has done nothing wrong, and he's just helped us out tremendously. Thank you, Sterling.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Now let's summarize some of the things we've learned about the critical points of a traffic stop. The first thing we talked about was pulling the car over to the right, stopping immediately, and turning the engine off. The next thing we addressed was the contents of the vehicle, and if you have any bags inside the vehicle, keeping them closed and the contents private. Then we talked about how Sterling reacted to the police officer approaching. He kept his hands on the wheel. The window was rolled down, and he was respectful at every point. He answered all of the officer's questions without admitting or denying anything. These are all critical aspects of avoiding a long-term issue that could end up in court. What Sterling did was limit the officer's ability to develop probable cause and give himself the best opportunity to simply receive a ticket and continue on his way. However, as we saw, Sterling was still asked to exit the vehicle. At that point, Sterling continued to respond appropriately and not make admissions or denials. He did exactly what the officer asked him to do, even if he disagreed with being asked to step from the vehicle. He complied with all of the instructions. And when he was asked for permission to search the vehicle, he didn't deny the officer permission. He simply told the officer he didn't have the authority to grant the permission. At every step, Sterling did everything honestly and told the officer the minimum amount that he needed to inform him of to minimize his risk of being arrested and ending up in court. If Sterling had ended up in court, all of the things he did minimized the incriminating information that the officer could use against him. At every point in this encounter, Sterling helped himself and, more importantly, did not help the police incriminate him.